The car hummed with the familiar sounds of our road trip, radio static, the soft hum of tires against asphalt, and her voice, telling me how excited she was for the weekend getaway. But then, without warning, her phone buzzed. It was a voicemail, nothing unusual. We had been getting a lot of calls and messages from work, friends, and family. But as the voicemail played over the car's Bluetooth, I froze. I heard it clear as day, a man's voice, deep and too comfortable, flirting with her in a way that sent ice running through my veins. "I can't wait to see you again," he said, his tone rich with unspoken promises. "I've been thinking about you all day. Let's pick up where we left off. Call me when you get a chance." My mind raced as the voicemail continued to echo through the speakers, a vivid picture of something I didn't want to imagine unfolding between them. "Who is that?" My voice cracked as I looked at her, but her gaze was fixed on the road ahead, her hands gripping the steering wheel too tightly. She didn't respond at first. I could see the muscles in her jaw tighten, her knuckles white. Her silence spoke volumes, yet I couldn't bring myself to stop the car or demand an answer immediately. The air between us was thick, as if the world outside had shifted, and I couldn't tell whether I wanted to tear into her with questions or just let the silence stretch on, swallowing whatever trust we had left. Her phone buzzed again, breaking the oppressive quiet. She didn't answer it, her eyes locked forward, but I couldn't look away. The scene from the voicemail, the man's voice, kept playing over and over in my mind like a song I couldn't erase. I needed answers, but I couldn't make myself ask. It was easier to just wait. A few minutes passed, the tension in the car now palpable, like a live wire that could snap at any moment. Finally, she spoke, but when she did, her words didn't hold the comfort I had hoped for. "It's nothing," she said, her voice steady but too rehearsed. "Just a guy from work. We were talking about a project we're collaborating on. That's all." I blinked, my chest tightening. "That's all?" The question hung in the air, heavy with disbelief. "It didn't sound like just a project, Sarah." Her eyes flicked to mine for the briefest of moments, then quickly returned to the road. "It's really nothing, Mark. Just a misunderstanding. You know how some people are. It's probably just a mix-up. He's harmless." She laughed, but the sound felt forced, like it didn't belong in the car with us. I stared at her, my mind whirling. "A mix-up?" I repeated, trying to make sense of the words. "A mix-up?" Was she really suggesting that this man, who had sounded so casual, so familiar in his message, had somehow gotten the wrong idea? That his flirtations, his clear suggestion to meet up, was just a misunderstanding? "Sarah, that didn't sound like a mix-up." Her hand tightened on the steering wheel, and I could see her shoulders stiffen. "Mark, you're overreacting," she said sharply, the edge in her voice now unmistakable. "It's nothing. Just a work thing. Please, let it go." Let it go. Her words stung more than they should have. I wanted to shout, to ask her what was really going on, to confront her with the truth I had already pieced together in my mind. But something in her tone, the way she dismissed it all, made me hesitate. I swallowed the lump in my throat and bit back the words that wanted to pour out. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I had misunderstood. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that nothing about this felt right. That voicemail was a red flag, and the excuse she offered only made everything worse. I wasn't just questioning her loyalty anymore, I was questioning everything. Her words felt too rehearsed, too calculated. I didn't recognize the woman sitting next to me anymore, and that realization was like a punch to the gut. We drove in silence for what felt like hours, each minute stretching on longer than the last. The hum of the engine, the faint static of the radio, nothing could drown out the voices in my head. I kept replaying the voicemail, hearing every word, feeling the weight of the man's voice like a crushing burden. How could she so easily brush it off? How could she so quickly try to make it seem like nothing? "Do you think I'm stupid?" I asked suddenly, the question escaping before I could stop it. Sarah's gaze flicked to me, and for a brief second, I saw something in her eyes. It wasn't guilt or shame, it was defensiveness, a flare of irritation. "What's that supposed to mean?" she snapped, her tone sharp. "Do you think I'm just going to let this go? That I'll believe that voicemail was nothing?" My voice was low, but there was an edge to it now. My hands gripped the seat in front of me, my fingers digging into the fabric as if holding onto something, anything, to steady myself. She sighed, her fingers tapping impatiently on the wheel. "Mark, seriously, we're on a road trip. This is supposed to be a weekend away. Don't you think you're overreacting a little? It was just a guy who got too familiar. No harm done." She glanced at me briefly before looking back at the road. It's not like you haven't heard me talk about him before. But I hadn't. I hadn't heard about him. Not in the way that would make me believe this could just be a harmless misunderstanding. And the fact that she hadn't even mentioned him once before, never once said, "Hey, there's this guy at work who's been a little too friendly," made the whole situation feel even more absurd. It wasn't just the voicemail that bothered me, it was the cover-up, the ease with which she dismissed it. That was what hurt the most. "Why didn't you tell me about him before?" I asked, keeping my voice steady, though my stomach was churning. "Why is he just popping up now, and why is he calling you at 11 p.m., leaving messages like that?" She took a deep breath, then exhaled slowly, as if trying to hold on to her patience. "Mark," she began, her tone softer now, "I didn't think it was important. He's just someone I've been working with for a few months. Nothing more." She paused, then glanced at me again, her eyes searching my face. "Please. Let it go." But I couldn't. The doubt had settled into my bones, and no matter how much she tried to convince me otherwise, something deep inside me knew this wasn't just a minor issue. It was a breach of trust. She could try to brush it off as nothing, but the voice on that voicemail wasn't some random coworker. It was someone who knew too much, someone who felt comfortable enough to speak in a way that wasn't professional, that wasn't just about work. I could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on me, suffocating me with its urgency. Would I confront her fully, demand the truth, or would I continue this trip in silence, pretending I hadn't heard what I knew now? Could I trust her again? Was this the beginning of something bigger, or just a small crack in the foundation of what we had? As the miles passed by, the quiet in the car felt like a chasm, one that seemed to widen with every moment. And no matter how much I wanted to believe her, no matter how much I tried to convince myself that it was nothing, I couldn't stop wondering. If this was just a harmless mistake, why did it feel so much like the beginning of the end? By the time we reached our destination, I was 1,000 miles away from the excitement I had felt earlier in the day. The miles we'd driven didn't just separate us from the city, they put a physical distance between us, too. Her excitement, once contagious, had faded into the background as the reality of that voicemail played over and over in my head. I couldn't stop hearing the man's voice. I couldn't stop picturing her there, on the other end of the line, flirting back, laughing, living a different life behind my back. As we pulled into the hotel parking lot, I could feel her tension, too. It was subtle at first, a slight tension in her shoulders, the way she gripped the wheel as we navigated the last few turns. I knew she was trying to keep it together, trying to act like everything was normal. But the air between us was thick, heavy with unspoken words. It was as though the space inside the car was shrinking with every passing second, until neither of us could breathe freely. We checked in silently. She did most of the talking, but her words felt empty, like they didn't quite reach me. I nodded, smiled when I had to, but inside, the storm was raging. I was trying so hard to keep it together, to pretend that everything was fine, but I couldn't shake the nagging feeling of betrayal that had taken root in my gut. I wanted to scream at her, demand answers, but something, perhaps fear or the tiny shred of hope that maybe I was wrong, kept me silent. We'd only just gotten here, and this was supposed to be our time away. The weekend was supposed to be an escape from our routine, a chance to reconnect. Instead, it felt like we were drifting further apart with each step we took. As we entered our hotel room, she set her bag down quickly, glancing over her shoulder at me as if trying to gauge my mood. I had to fight the urge to leave, to walk out of that room and away from the mess we were in. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. Not yet. She looked at me, her voice quieter now. "Mark, please. I know this is hard, but I told you it's nothing. There's nothing to worry about." I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there, my back to her, staring out of the window at the distant skyline. The city lights blurred in front of me. "Then why does it feel like there's something more?" I said, my voice low. "Why does it feel like you're hiding something from me?" I could feel her breath hitch behind me. "Mark, I'm not hiding anything. You've got to trust me. Please." I spun around, frustration boiling over. "How can I trust you when you've been keeping secrets like this from me? When your voicemail sounds like something I don't even recognize, from someone I've never heard of?" My voice cracked, and I hated myself for showing this side, for sounding so desperate, but I couldn't hold it back anymore. "I don't even know who you are anymore, Sarah." She flinched at my words, but I couldn't take them back. This wasn't just about a voicemail, it was about all the quiet little things I had missed, all the tiny signs that added up to something much bigger. Something I didn't want to believe was happening. And now, Faced with the truth, I wasn't sure how to feel about her anymore. "I don't want to fight with you, Mark," she said softly, her eyes downcast. "Please, just listen to me. I've been stressed. You know how much work is consuming me. And the guy, he's just a friend. Someone I can talk to about things I can't share with you right now. It was nothing more. Please believe me." My heart felt like it was being squeezed. "So you've been lying to me, Sarah? Hiding a friend behind my back, someone who, what? You're flirting with him? What about everything we've built? What about the trust we've had?" She shook her head, her eyes filled with confusion and pain. "No. It wasn't like that. I swear to you. It wasn't like that at all." Her voice was breaking now, and I could see the fear creeping into her features, the fear of losing me. "Please, just give me a chance to explain." The words hung in the air between us like a fragile thread. Part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that this was just a misunderstanding, a bump in the road that we could move past. But every inch of my gut was telling me something different, telling me that I was being lied to, told half-truths that masked something darker. "Explain?" I echoed, my voice trembling with uncertainty. "How can you explain away something like this? How do you explain away a voicemail from some guy, telling you to call him, telling you he's been thinking about you?" My hands shook as I ran them through my hair. "This isn't just a little slip-up, Sarah. This is betrayal." She stepped closer, her voice desperate. "No, it's not. I promise, Mark. It was just a conversation. You don't understand how much pressure I've been under. I've been overwhelmed with everything, with work, with trying to keep it together. I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want you to think I was pulling away from you. I didn't want to drag you into it." She reached for my hands, her touch gentle but pleading. "I didn't want to hurt you. I swear to God, I never meant to hurt you." I pulled my hands away, unsure if I even wanted to feel her touch anymore. It felt wrong. All of it felt wrong. "So you're telling me that a man calling you at 11 p.m., telling you he's been thinking about you, is just an innocent conversation?" I laughed bitterly. "What am I supposed to believe here, Sarah? How do I trust you after all this? How?" Her face crumpled, and I saw the tears begin to form in her eyes. "Mark, please, don't leave me. I swear, it's nothing. You have to believe me. It was just," she paused, searching for the words, "just a moment of weakness. It meant nothing. It really didn't." But it wasn't just about the voicemail anymore. It wasn't about her talking to someone else, even though that was painful. It was about the complete breakdown of trust, the way she had kept me in the dark, the way I had spent months, maybe years, believing that everything between us was perfect. How many times had I overlooked things like this? How many times had I failed to see the cracks that had been there all along? I wanted to scream, to shout at her to tell me the truth, but instead, I stood there, numb, the weight of the betrayal hanging heavy in my chest. I felt like I was suffocating under the pressure of what I was hearing and seeing. Her face, so familiar, was now a stranger's, a person I couldn't recognize, someone hiding behind excuses, behind lies. "I don't know what to do anymore, Sarah," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I don't know if I can just forget this. I don't know if I can trust you again." She stepped closer to me again, but this time, I didn't let her touch me. She stood there, tears rolling down her face, but the space between us felt as wide as an ocean. "I'll do whatever it takes to make this right," she said, her voice desperate. "Please don't give up on us." But I couldn't answer. I didn't know if there was a way back from this. The damage felt too deep, too real. The man's voice still echoed in my mind, and I knew that it wasn't just his words I couldn't forget, it was everything else that had been left unsaid. We stood there in the silence, both of us too broken to speak, too hurt to find a way forward. The weekend, which had once promised to be an escape, now felt like a prison, one we had locked ourselves into, one where the truth would have to come out sooner or later. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if I could find a way to forgive her, or if this was the beginning of the end. But in that moment, I knew one thing: nothing would ever be the same again. The following morning, I woke up to a silence so thick it felt suffocating. The tension between Sarah and I had settled like a heavy fog, clouding everything in our small hotel room. She was already awake, sitting by the window, staring out at the skyline. I could hear her soft breathing, but neither of us spoke. It wasn't that we had no words left, it was that the words we needed to say didn't seem to matter anymore. I got out of bed, walked over to the small kitchen area, and poured myself some coffee. It was bitter, and as I took a sip, I couldn't help but think that it reflected the taste of the morning after everything had changed. The voicemail still echoed in my mind, each word from that man, casual and almost possessive, playing like a song I couldn't unhear. I thought I'd seen our relationship clearly before, but now I was left in the dark, trying to find my footing again. Sarah turned to me, her face drawn, her eyes red from crying the night before. "Mark," she began, her voice soft but steady. "I know I hurt you. I know I've broken your trust, and I don't expect you to forgive me right away. But I'm asking for a chance to prove myself to you. To make it right." I swallowed, my throat dry, and leaned against the counter, struggling to keep my voice even. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Sarah," I admitted, the words feeling like a weight I couldn't shake. "I don't know if I can just forget what happened, or trust you the way I did before. It feels like everything we built was based on something that isn't real." She reached out, but this time, I didn't pull away. Her hand gently touched mine, but there was no comfort in it. "I know," she whispered. "I know. But I love you, Mark. I don't want to lose you. Please, I'm asking you, give me a chance to fix this. I'm willing to do anything to rebuild what I've broken." I looked at her, my emotions tangled, anger, sadness, disappointment, and yes, a flicker of hope. I had loved her so completely. We had shared so much. Our plans, our future, how could I just walk away from that? But could I live with the constant doubt, the constant question of what was real and what had been a lie? "Sarah," I said slowly, my voice tight, "you say you want to fix this, but I don't know where to even start. It's not just about what you did, it's about why you didn't trust me enough to tell me. Why you thought it was okay to keep this secret, to let it grow until it became something bigger than we both could handle." Her face crumpled, and I saw the regret in her eyes, the sorrow. But the regret alone wouldn't fix this. "I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want to burden you with my insecurities. But I see now how wrong that was. I should have talked to you. I should have been open, and I wasn't. I'm so sorry." There was sincerity in her voice, a rawness I hadn't heard before. But the truth of it didn't make it any easier. I had been so blind, so trusting. I had believed her, believed in our love without question, and now I was left with pieces that didn't fit together the way I remembered. "I don't know what to do, Sarah," I said quietly, my eyes avoiding hers as I stared down at the coffee in my hands. "Part of me wants to walk away. To just leave and never look back. But another part of me," I paused, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Another part of me wants to believe you, wants to give us a chance, but I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can trust you again." She nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek. "I understand, Mark. I've lost your trust, and I don't know how to earn it back. But I'm not going to stop trying. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll show you that I can be the person you thought I was. I can't undo the past, but I can work to make the future better. If you'll let me." The silence hung in the air, thick and oppressive. I wanted so badly to believe her, to believe that this moment was some terrible misunderstanding, but I knew better. There were too many things I had ignored, too many signs that I had dismissed out of convenience. The voicemail wasn't just about a guy from work, it was about how we had both let things slip, how we had both allowed the walls to come up around us without realizing it. We had let distance creep in slowly, until it became a chasm we could no longer ignore. "I don't know what to say," I finally replied, my voice hoarse. "I can't promise you anything, Sarah. I can't promise that we can just pick up where we left off. But I can promise that I need space to figure this out. I need time." She looked at me, her face filled with sorrow and acceptance. "I understand. I'll give you the time you need. But I'm not going anywhere. I'm here for you, no matter what." I nodded, my chest tight with conflicting emotions. I didn't know how long it would take, but I knew I couldn't rush it. Maybe we'd find our way back to each other, or maybe this was the end of the road. But for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like I was taking a step toward something that wasn't built on lies, something that wasn't based on what I wanted to see but on what was real. We spent the next few days in silence, a fragile truce hanging between us. We tried to go through the motions of the weekend, but the spark that had once been there between us was gone. Instead of laughter and shared moments, there were uncomfortable silences and awkward glances. It was as if we were strangers trying to navigate a relationship we no longer understood. In those moments of stillness, I reflected on everything: the man's voicemail, her reaction, the trust that had been so easily broken. I thought about the future, about whether I could ever see her the same way again, or if we were too far gone to rebuild. And through it all, I realized that there was no clear path forward, no clear way to reconcile what had been shattered. But I also knew this: I couldn't keep living in uncertainty, in the limbo of unspoken words and unresolved feelings. I needed answers, and I needed time to come to terms with the reality of the situation. For now, the only thing I could do was focus on myself, to find the strength to decide whether we could move forward or if this was the end. That evening, after an uncomfortable dinner in silence, I walked out onto the balcony of the hotel room and stared out at the city skyline. The lights glittered in the distance, but they couldn't drown out the darkness I felt inside. The future was uncertain, but I had to start facing it, no matter how painful. As I stared into the distance, I realized that this was a turning point. It wasn't just about the voicemail, the betrayal, it was about who we were now, and who we could still be. Whether we would rebuild or part ways, it was a decision I had to make. But for now, I didn't have the answers. All I had was the quiet uncertainty of what lay ahead.